Vision Radio 345 in conversation.
I'm back again with Tony Stuart. This is our third podcast. Tony, again, how you doing? I've got to ask you how you are because I know you're a very busy man.
I'm perfectly all right. You know, good old work always keeps you on my toes. So, yeah, I'm healthy. Health is your wealth, as they say.
Good, great stuff. Now, I'm just going to touch back on, for those who didn't catch up with us, our last podcast, we talked about young people at home and having conversations around the table. And I remember, going back to what we was talking about in the last show, that the table is important. It was a place where families sat down and eat and people had conversations. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, now we're not seeing that. We're seeing people sitting down on sofas or upstairs in their room. Mm-hmm. And from my experience of growing up and as a young man, we always had the table ready. Somebody had to go and set the table, get the knives and forks, make sure everything's all right. Mum's preparing the dinner. And whether you was upstairs or not, we had to come to that table and have that conversation. Mm-hmm. Obviously, times have changed.
Yeah.
And I think with that in mind, I think it's a very good way to start having conversations, or I should say, a progressive way, because for some families they don't have the time to do that. But it's quite crucial to have those conversations around the table. We've seen, obviously, people got very large families, but even then, they'd always make room for everybody to sit down and have some kind of conversation. Mm-hmm. And it's a topic some young people would tell you, I don't eat with my family, I'd rather go upstairs, and they've got their phone having bits of pizzas and while they're talking on their phone, etc. Mm-hmm. And I think that can be reversed in some way or form if we, like we said, bring the table back. I think it's a great idea.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree. I mean, yeah, in the last conversation we had, we did talk about that communication, about having that discussion, and I guess that has been lost, and there hasn't been a place that can begin.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, on talking on that topic of the table, that had a lot of significance to a lot of people our age. Most definitely. I mean, even if we wasn't talking to our parents the rest of the day, we all knew when it came to dinner time, you had no choice. Yeah. You was gonna kind of have some grilling of some sort, about what's going on with your friends, and so I guess talking about the table as a metaphor, I think it's quite powerful. I don't think people have to necessarily, go down IKEA and get a new table and start having a conversation around that table. That would be nice, wouldn't it? It would be a start. But I think as a metaphor, the table should mean really a place to discuss maybe things past, maybe things on your mind, feelings, because as you said also, nowadays, I guess a lot of the children, they spend a lot of times in their room, whether it's Netflix. I can imagine as well, there's a lot of them out there on WhatsApp, and they're part of a lot of WhatsApp groups. I mean, I know there's been instances where families actually are in the same houses and they literally call each other on their phones or WhatsApp each other.
Unbelievable.
And stuff like that, definitely a lot of boys I've worked with, they're big time into gaming. So, a lot of the times, a lot of them just come home and they're straight onto their game. Now they talk to each other with headphones. They can compete with teams and all that. And they pretty much don't speak to their parents. I mean, less said better. I mean, I won't generalize all of them.
No.
But then there has been instances where boys I've counselled have actually had like a very strained relationship with their mum to a degree where they're saying to me, well, basically, my mum's impossible. I just can't. They said to me, the only solution is me leaving home. And they're basically counting the days down. And it's a thing where gaming is their savior, because they're not going to have that conversation with their
Wow.
mum. And so, yeah, I think if bringing table into that, I think they definitely need a table to start their discussion.
And I'm just thinking, as you're talking about the table, it's funny how if they said, let's go out to a restaurant and eat, you're sitting at a table.
I don't think that would happen. But yeah,
Wow.
okay, that wouldn't happen.
Wow.
Their relationship was so far gone that literally, because we're we know about the problems. We're very good at talking about problems.
Yeah.
And what I like to do is, there's a saying that goes something like, whatever you focus on grows. So I'm very mindful of that. So I'm very, you can explore the problem. Okay, let's talk about the problem. But then when it comes to solution,
Yeah.
you have to be, that way inclined. And so in saying that, I've been that way with this guy, and it's almost like anything I say, it's like, nope, I've tried that. How about, talking about boundaries with your mum, and maybe,
Yeah.
no, I've tried that. She's going to do this, she's going to do that. And it's almost like, there's no way. And he'd bring his dad into it and say, oh, my dad's the same. My dad doesn't text her. He'd email her. My mum's sister, she doesn't like her as well. And do you get what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
In terms of an extreme case like that,
Yeah.
how would you implement the table, would you say?
No, that's a very good question. A very good question. I think it has to go back. It has to go back to the parent. And I get what I just heard what he just said. He's found it an impossible task, but there has to be somebody somewhere at that point who will have to take the initiative to say, well, look, this is what I think we should do, or as we've discussed in our previous podcast about mediation, people coming in and making suggestions, or making that adult think, well, and make them think, but have a connection with somebody. Say, look, I've got an idea. I wonder if we can how can we get us to sit round the table, or what did you do? Because they could have went to somebody else's house, for example, and seen those things happening. That's probably what they would like to see, and probably probe questions like, we had a kind of similar situation, but now your family's sitting down. How did you go about it? How did you make it happen? And then probably they can get ideas. But
I think it's a good idea. What I do for a living, I think it definitely help if I could actually have spoken to his mum as well.
yeah, absolutely.
Because all I've got is his word, and in terms of building rapport, making him feel comfortable and accepted, I have to take his word for it. Because when I start saying to him, maybe it's not you. Sorry, maybe if it's not your mum, it's you. If I said to him, it's you and it's not your mum, then hope is lost, because he's come to get some help from me.
Right.
So it's a thing we have to tread careful. But at the same time, I don't really want to demonize the mum. I want to be like, I know what you're saying. I know your mum, she's difficult. But then if it becomes the mum's the problem, then to some degree you're removing the possibility of change, because he's not being accountable for what he's doing. Do you know what I mean? And it's not always black and white. But one thing I think is very important, I think maybe parents might need that, maybe therapeutic support. Some psychological, maybe some counselling or something, because I think it will help bridge the whole picture. And I think in some instances I've spoken to parents, like some of the students have said to me where I work, can you speak to my parents? And I've spoken to the parents, and they're really glad for it, because they kind of open up and they tell me things that I didn't know before. Maybe some things about the school sometimes, and I'm like, wow, that's interesting. So I definitely feel that it needs, as we said, that mediator. If there's a mediator that can
bridge that kind of the area of an issue.
And it's neutral. It has to be neutral. Can't be seen to be taking sides or colluding.
Because because some parents would. I mean, ultimately, if you ask, I can't say for everybody, but I know that, it's a nice thing to see when you're sitting down with your family and everybody's eating and somebody's passing the sauce over or passing the drink and you're having that kind of conversation.
Like Night Professor, like in the movies. He's got the big face, It's almost like, does that only happen in the movies? Do some
Yeah.
families do that? Maybe some families do it only at Christmas.
Yeah.
Maybe. I don't know.
And even that's questionable because
Yeah, true.
the way things are going now,
Yeah.
and parents, I mean, that's the worst time to have a fraud in it or any kind of big argument. They don't wait. They could have started from January or worked it out before that. They wait till Christmas, a time of a celebration.
Yeah.
A time and place for everything. There's always a time and place for everything. Unfortunately, some people just use the wrong time to have. And
that's a good point as well. Yeah, some people only just maybe eat around a table when maybe it's a birthday or, I mean, lucky if you do that actually, but a Christmas.
Yeah.
And it should be something that's...
and it's funny, they always say...
more regular.
Yeah. They always say, oh, wouldn't it be nice if we do this every day? We'll just do it then.
True.
They'll take pictures of it and everything and look at the table, just do that every day. And it brings a new kind of perspective to the house, so to speak, because obviously we live in modern times and people are banging out takeaways like I don't know what
exactly.
Uber this, Uber that, the bell's ringing, everything is going out at one time. But going back to our point, with sitting around the table, I mean, hot discussions, depending on what it is, needs to be talked about. Some children would love to have that around the table and speak openly. Some people have it on a one-to-one basis. But for me, it's always going back to that table because, as you say, tables like it's communion, isn't it? We sit down, we eat. You don't have to have a big discussion, but the fact that you're actually together is something that, some people or, most children would like to have, as part of their growing up. When you can't speak to other children, what's like in your house? Oh, we always sit down at the table. Do you? We don't do that in our house. So it's nice if we can get some of the young people who have those experiences to share it because they've all come from, some of them may have come from difficult backgrounds, but at least they've made a start or started some kind of conversation with their parents. But I do think parents do need to kind of bring that back in the table. It's got to be the table.
The table's brilliant, my man. I mean, going to have to do up some flyers, some flags, some, some memorabilia for that. Some merch, you know what I mean? Get some the table merch going. I guess an important thing for the table is probably the time as well. And, some time management in terms of everybody's at different pace, maybe in life or in their own daily schedule, let's say. And by the time parents get home, I mean, it's like almost everything's out of sync.
Yeah.
So the children might get home before the parents, and so then therefore the child might eat before the parent. So there'll always be that excuse for not eating together, or as we said, the table having that discussion.
Yeah.
But I think discussions start with very simple things like, but how do you feel?
Yeah.
We could talk about how's your day, but then how do you actually feel?
Yeah.
And maybe that could be a start. And, maybe parents don't know what to do with that. Like, okay, how do you feel? And then the child tells you how they feel. And then you're like, oh, carry on. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, that's great. We didn't mean to go too deep into it. But, I mean, again, if a parent, it's like what we spoke about in, previous podcasts about their parenting style. Yeah. If they're authoritarian, then their approach might be kind of to shut them off again. Yeah. And, that's not the way we go about things. If it's somebody who's more liberal, if the parent more liberal, maybe they might be open for that. But I think part of that table discussion when they're sitting around should be, how do you feel?
Yeah. And you raised some good points because obviously the conversation ultimately should be around the table because I think it's a mutual place. Some young people may say that if there's an issue in the house, they may say, you might call them and say, well, come downstairs and talk. Let's sit around the table and talk. I don't want to talk around the table. I want to talk in my room. So you've got that kind of thing where you're going into their kind of territory, so to speak. But it doesn't become mutual because you're on their kind of patch. Although it's your house, that's their personal space. Yeah. So it's important that sitting around the table forms a neutral area.
Absolutely.
Because if you're having some parents, or some people do come up with in those situations where they've gone to the child's room and knocked on the door and said, "I want to have a word with you," and then the child's room said, "Come out of my room," because they're invading space and it doesn't make them feel comfortable to talk about it at that particular time. But bringing them to the table brings them to a neutral place. So let's make something to eat and talk about this and see where we go. It's those kind of things that encourage the young person to move from where they are at their comfort zone to that mutual spot.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point as well. I think, as we said as well in previous podcasts about making it, negotiable for both parties, making the child feel that they're a part of the process of making those decisions. And, why not? The child should be able to kind of say, I'd like to talk about this at the table, or these are sort of conversation we could have at the table.
Yeah.
And again, if it's a case of, okay, when would you like to have it in your room, or when can I come in your room to have that discussion? I think, the child has to feel like they're a part of the decision making, and it makes it easier because a child shouldn't be forced to, sit at the table and talk.
No, absolutely.
And that's, again, getting that balance right.
Yeah.
And trying to make it like the child can kind of like volunteer and feel like they want to do it rather than, this is what we used to do, so you must do this now. No, absolutely right. And I think that as we've always discussed, it's not what you say, it's how you say it and how that is presented to the child. Yeah. If you're there banging the door down and so forth and so on, you're not going to get no answer. So I think those discussions, those simple discussions, okay, let's talk about it downstairs. I think we should talk about it downstairs, what time, etc., etc. But always trying to bring it back to that table, because I think if you use the table as a metaphor, as you said, always directing it back there, eventually the child would succumb to at some point and say, I need to talk about this, let's sit. Or do you remember, Dad or Mum, you said you wanted to talk to me? Yeah, I'm ready to talk now. Yeah. Let's go and sit at the table. As the Americans say, let's break bread at the table.
Yeah. And those are the things that I think, they're getting lost through generations, obviously, because we're now in a different space of time.
The interesting thing is, again, what we spoke about previously about support networks. So if they're not getting that discussion at the table, then where are they getting it? So then they might go to some other table and have that discussion. And you want to hope that table is bringing nourishing and healthy discussions. That's the risk we run by not implementing the table, you know. And another thing, I think it's worth talking about what sort of discussion should be had at the table. Maybe if they had lost for what to talk about, or they don't know how to have that discussion.
Yeah, and I think as we rightly said about parents, we lead by example. I remember when your relative or a person used to come round, they never used to say, "Oh, let's go and sit in the kitchen and talk." They always come to the table, and as a young man, you're growing up and you see your friends, your mum's friends come round or your dad's friends come round, they're sitting down. They always sit at the table and have that kind of conversation. And those are the things that, as you've said, some of the children are missing. They don't see that anymore. Everybody's locked up in their different areas. But again, I think it's a great place to actually start. It's funny because when they have their friends round, you don't see them at the table. They're all huddle up inside one room.
They are.
Right? And you tell them, come out the room and come and sit at the table and talk. But if that's not been shown around the house, they wouldn't even bring their friends to that point, because it's not been set as an example to say that. They don't see their parents doing it, so why should I?
Yeah.
So as we've always said, everything stems from the home, and it's those little tiny things that make a huge difference, not just to the family but to the individual, because they know they can come to a place and sit down and have a conversation. Yeah.
It'd be outside their comfort zone, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
I can imagine what that would be like, not having had that experience of, eating at a table and then going to your friends and seeing their family do that. can you imagine if they had like a 5-course meal when you had the different cutlery and you're like, which one do I use?
Yeah.
That'd be really awkward, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
But as you said, I think it would be a really, it'd be a refreshing experience for that child. And I guess it can, make them grow. Because one thing I've always been fascinated with, I think there's been programs on TV about dinner tables, and dinner table talk.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's something that's always intrigued me. Like, I'd like to be on the table where you have very good conversationists.
Yeah.
And they're, curious to know about you.
Yeah.
That's something, definitely that needs to be kind of copywritten and need to get some merch out. You know what I mean? The table.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think otherwise it helps them to develop good social skills for themselves as well. I mean, when they have their own friends around their own place and so forth and so on, it just makes a big difference.
Yeah.
As opposed to you snacking out with your friends, and it leaves that footprint of legacy of what your parents used to do and passing those things down. Because to me, that they are very valuable. As much as eating in your room is kind of okay. Unless you experience that table experience.
Yeah. Can I just interested as well, because there is a lot to pass on, isn't there?
Yeah.
And I mean, when you look at different traditions, maybe, from tribes, different cultures, I mean, they pass all their traditions different.
Yeah.
I guess being over here in the West, the table again was a place where a lot of information, wisdom was passed.
Yeah.
Maybe because it was so busy in our day, the only time the family did get together was the table.
Yeah.
And I guess that's been lost, hasn't it? Passing that baton over. I think a lot of these young people are missing out on a lot of wisdom.
Yeah.
Like, for instance, depending on what your family or your parents' belief is.
Yeah.
If you're not going church, or maybe you guys don't do Bible studies, then a lot of that, the wealth in wisdom, direction, and guidance, I guess, is lost with that missing table.
Yeah. And the conversations, because sometimes you'll be surprised when adults are having conversations around the table and talking about something that happened, like their friend might be talking about something that happened when they come over here in the 60s or whatever, and you're there like perked up thinking, does that really happen? But it's all part of that experience of like, wow. And you may not have got that experience because, especially now, people all over the place, you won't hear those stories again from your parents because you wasn't there sitting down, you're busy doing X, Y, Z. But those little things are memories that you just cannot move those memories. They'll always be there once you've had that experience of sitting around the table and talking to you. Because sometimes you question them and they're like, what was it really like? What was it like, especially when they came over here, what was it really like? And you're kind of intrigued to find out, is that what happened? But imagine if you wasn't sitting at that table, you wouldn't know better. You'd probably be on your phone.
Well, yeah. That actually reminds me of last Christmas. Actually, I sat at the biggest table I've ever sat at. My niece, she had I think it was like 30 of us. Wow. A long table.
Where was this?
This was in Becontree.
Wow.
Hold up. Sorry, Brentwood. That's
okay.
What she lives. And it was a B. No, it started with a B. It was Brentwood. And there was a reason why I mentioned that. I'd never sat at a table like that before. And I mean, the conversation was pretty much everywhere. But what was we saying before? I actually lost my train of thought there. You said something, and I thought about that. And I was like, wow, the table. I actually sat at a table. And I think there was a lot of opportunities. I mean, there was different type personalities.
Yeah.
And I think what was kind of, maybe something that struck me was like the different generations.
Yeah, I think what you're talking about is when we're talking about listening to people's past and how things worked for them at that time and just being intrigued by the whole thing, about the whole storyline. I think that's what it was.
Is that what we were saying?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. I mean, there was a lot of generations there.
Yeah.
There's a lot of generations, and it was quite humbling because I don't think I've sat around a table like that.
As much as the food is good as well, you're listening as well.
It was beautiful.
Yeah.
I mean, we said a grace before meals, and I mean, again, it's interesting. What I found interesting in terms of a big table as well, you have two positions at the top, you know, and you always should have the head at the top of the table, right? Which is quite significant as well, because then I think if the head of the table, if they're not like haven't got that leadership, I mean, well, it's actually, do you actually see the significance of sitting at the head of the table? And I'm not sure if that was actually kind of thought out, if I must be honest, because maybe it was my own expectations. I thought, wow, this long table, we sit down. Like I said, it's back to the movies. It was like, this is going to be like Nutty Professor and his family. Yeah. But then again, I mean, if you haven't seen people a long time, there's probably so much to say. And you know, I mean, I did my best. I think I tried to be myself. And I think what I did realize, actually, when you do have a family with a lot of females, you have that female energy. The guys kind of be like, yep, whatever the females say, we'll go with that. Yeah. And it's almost like, how can I say this? It's almost like the direction of the discussion just goes many directions. Yeah, yeah. As opposed to, like, for instance, we could say, okay, let's look at the past year. What's happened? Yeah. Put everything in perspective, so on and so forth. And I think this goes back to what is the discussion? Maybe actually when the table is there, metaphorically speaking, some people, because they're not in the practice of sitting at a table, it's like, what do you have? What sort of conversation do you have? How do you start that conversation?
Wow, that's interesting. That's interesting.
We've never had this conversation before.
And sometimes that could be awkward for some. Yeah.
This is what I mean. But especially if it's parents to child, because think about it, a child might have stuff they don't really want their parents to know. Like, they say, I'm vaping. Yeah. Like, if you really want to have trust or build trust, you take that risk. Be like, look, I vape, and just see, like, test the water.
The reaction.
Yeah, and if you can't take the vape, then you ain't gonna want to know about the bottle of vodka or whatever it is.
Because the parents will stop in their tracks while they're eating that food and think,
is that what you're doing? Yeah.
And then that could go one way or the other. It really depends. And this is why we talked about in our past conversation about communicating and having open dialogue before you get to the table. Because, as you said, the table is a place of communion where we eat. And it's nice when you have those conversations. Yeah. But then there's a time and place for everything. And if you're comfortable enough to have those conversations around the table while you're eating, that's great stuff. That's great stuff.
Yeah. I think, going back to my point, I think it was because it was just Christmas as well. Don't think we've eaten around the table that long. And it goes back to that point. It's like, does it take a celebration? Do we wait till we have the celebration? Usually that's the whole thing, isn't it? Yeah. That's usually when the table gets rolled out.
That's a good point, because there's a lot of dust on it before that.
Lots of dust. Been catching for how long? Do you know what I mean?
But it is nice if that was happening once or twice a week in the household. And for me, it used to be a regular thing, especially on the Sundays. You'll have your meal, and then also in the week you'll have your meal. But sometimes your parents were coming a bit late. But it was nice because even then, because we got so used to it, we didn't even take our plate to the room. You would sit at the table and you would eat. Yeah. If parents are there, they'll come and they eat by the table, whether they've come in late or not. But they're still eating at the table, and they'll ask you questions. And that's something that you can treasure if you have those experiences. But as we've said, the times that we're living in now, people don't have that kind of time to do those things. But I think it's important, even from a small age. You bring up your high chair, the little one sitting on the corner there, and everybody's eating at the same time. And as we said, it's a great place for dialogue to happen.
It is a great place for dialogue to happen. We'll have to do an app, table. And parents can download it, and they'll be able to start that conversation with their children. Say, "Hey, you're in your room. Let's sit at the table. Let's log on to this app." As I said, like, that's copywritten, all right? So if you're listening to this, don't try and take my idea, because I've already put money on the IP, okay?
It'd be interesting to see that, if that was to happen.
No, mate, I mean, I think maybe they need that at this point. Some sort of, something like that can
So instead of sitting at a real table, they go on an app.
That's called the table. So you could be in your house,
Yeah.
and your child could be upstairs in their room, and you could just, scroll down the different categories of conversations that you may want to have. Like, so the parents could be quite curious as to da-da-da-da, and they'd be like, okay, your parent has just logged into the table. No, it won't be logged into. Your parents has just sat at the table, like, metaphorically speaking.
That's unreal,
and then the child would have to answer those questions. So whether you want to have the conversation or not, we're going to have the conversation. Whether it's on the app.
So it would take that for them to actually come to the table.
Well, sometimes. I mean, look, I could go through a lot of young people I've worked with, and I could tell you that, like, they talk, children talk to their parents, but there's problems going on between them that's not being spoken about, and most of it is, like I said, it could be past things that haven't been resolved. But as we all say, it's like, forget about it. It's in the past.
Yeah.
But again, it goes back to a lot of, like, how would we say it? Atonement. Like, a lot of forgiving has to be done. A lot of healing has to be done first. Like, it's not a place a lot of people like to go, the past.
Yeah.
But in terms of parenting and stuff and kind of healing the wounds, I think you do have to kind of, like, go back and say, oh, that time when I did that, I was insensitive, kind of thing. And then it's almost like
they've got to tiptoe around they've got to tiptoe around the parents, or the parents got to tiptoe around the young people.
Well, yeah, children hold on to stuff too.
Yeah.
I mean, and I think their world and adult world is different. I think with children, they have to try to maneuver and be a certain way in an adult environment.
Yeah.
When in their environment, it's more, there's less rules. There's, like, you just do kind of, you know what I mean? And so it's like speaking to, like, parents. I mean, if a child's at school, I mean, they get that from the teachers. They get it from when they get in detention, or IE, they get it from the secretary. The secretary is, why are you late, and all this sort of stuff. So living in the adult world, children are probably really fed up of just playing along, really,
conforming,
and not being, and not, adults not really listening.
Yeah,
it is pretty much do this, do that, and I think listening to be heard, a child are probably. Yeah, it's probably best thing you could do at the table as well. Maybe because listening is a communication skill as well.
Well, listen, I was about to say that. I was just talking about listening. I said that's one of the things I was going to mention about is the listening around the table and how that is important, because we can all sit there and have multiple conversations, but then are we listening at that time when we're around the table?
Yeah,
and that makes a huge difference, because I don't know, could you imagine you're sitting at the table with your parents and your parents say, well, let's have a conversation about so-and-so, and you're not saying nothing, you're just listening, and you're wondering, why aren't they saying nothing? But because we're listening, and that's what I think that's what kind of sets the pace for progression to come around that table again, if we have those things in place.
I mean, that's interesting what you said there about when you're not saying nothing and the child says, oh, why aren't you saying anything? And you said, because we're listening. And I think the interesting thing about that is, in terms of listening being a communication skill, is how do you, because it's like active listening. It's like, how do you confirm that you've been listening? Yeah. And again, that's like counseling skills. Like, it's like, what communication skills should I say? Because it's like a form of showing that you have been listening is to paraphrase what a person's just said.
Yeah.
And if you can kind of use other words to feedback what they've said, that person can confirm, yeah, you just listened to me.
Yeah.
So you can be silent, but does that mean you've been listening? I guess that's the question.
Yeah, that's true.
And I guess I'm trying to dig a bit deeper in terms of what
Right.
communication means and what
Yeah.
listening actually means, because you do have to ask for clarification. Like,
Absolutely.
so if you're listening, okay, I've heard what you had to say. Can I clarify that this is what I heard? And then it's when you can kind of say to me, yes, then you can say you did listen to me.
That's a valid point there, because sometimes when you speak to kids and you say, are you sure that's what I said, and they say, well, I'm not too sure that didn't you get what I say, I can't explain it, and then that becomes another issue within itself.
Block,
Yeah. And again, I think we discussed it before about young people, doing a lot of reading and exploring their vocabulary a bit more wider than what it usually is, because sometimes that is a blockage within itself, and parents get frustrated. We can't have the conversation because you're not explaining. But I've already explained, don't you understand? No.
But.
Yeah, and it just gets a bit complicated. So timing is good.
Yeah.
And knowing when to talk and when not to talk, and when to know the conversation's not going to go nowhere.
Absolutely. You're right.
Which makes the
time and place for everything.
Yeah, which kind of makes it manageable, because at least so you haven't broken the progress that you've made at that particular point by saying the wrong thing, because that could turn either way. And I don't want to talk no more. You wasn't listening. Yeah, I was listening, but I think we should have this conversation again at some point at the table.
Yeah, down like the app.
Which makes again a huge difference to standing outside the door talking and them sitting on their bed while they're on the phone.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
that conversation is not going to happen.
I mean, it's interesting. Again, I mean, I was just thinking about actually food, and I mean, the other day, we was laughing about Deliveroo and delivery and all that, but then we ordered from Urban Chocolatier.
Okay.
And Urban Chocolatier just does all desserts, right?
Okay.
But very sweet stuff. I mean, quite interesting. But it kind of in ordering that with my daughter, it was like we had a conversation as well.
Okay.
Around it, and different things going on, and there were some realizations. But my thinking, the reason why I said that is because, food brings people together as well. And maybe what we could do with the table app, they can have the option of actually ordering food as well.
That's a good
have
idea.
That conversation.
but then
Eat
after
some
that,
food at the same time.
would they be ticking the boxes when you ask them questions? Could they be too busy eating, right?
Yeah. Then the parent could say, "Let me tell you, don't eat with your mouth open." Do you know what I mean? So you can throw a bit of authoritarian kind of parent in there as well.
It's all about the balance.
Yeah.
It's all about the balance. Anyway, listen, Tony, it's great again speaking to you. We'll have to catch up again for another podcast, and it was kind of interesting because, as I said, the table is one of the key points. What the home's missing now, and it'd be nice to actually see that bring back into people's households, because, as you know, everybody's busy.
This is it.
Nice. I'm going to have a discussion with somebody actually about. I'm going to ask a young person if they actually have meals at home and what does that look like, and just do a bit of research and come back and have a conversation.
It'd be interesting conversation. I think, did we speak about it, in terms of the way people's schedules are? Parents leave at one time, they come back another. Children, they get home whatever time. I'm not sure if parents are at home by the time children get home, or whether parents are actually cooking, or what the whole thing is.
Or maybe they may give them the leadership role to do it, so when they come in, the table's set and everybody eats. Could be a good idea.
Are you speaking about in terms of what they could do now?
Yeah, giving them the leadership role.
Who, the children?
Setting the table up.
That would be good. Then the parent would, have to really be there and to eat, and not really criticise too much the child's cooking. No.
No, the parents would cook the
to
food, but they come and just prepare the table, get everything laid out, so when they come in.
Oh, so you mean teamwork?
Yeah.
Team effort. That would be. I mean, I think you're running before you can walk here. I think you just try to get them to the table first.
Yeah. I think we'll do that first.
And like, if you're saying to them, you have to set the table before we sit and have this discussion.
But at least I'm not cooking.
Then you're like,
knives and forks out, isn't it?
yeah. They'd say to you, I thought this was about a conversation. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, so now I'm laying the table.
Setting the table, that's right.
Cool, to Bennett, yeah.
Anyway, thanks, Tony.
Yes.
And we'll definitely meet up again.
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me again.
Thank you.
Take care.
To leave your comments or views about any of our podcast episodes, go to visionradio345@gmail.com.